All right. So good morning, everyone. Um, Thank you so much again for attending day two of the Greater Baltimore Wilderness Coalition's Nature City Forum. We really appreciate everyone's time and energy and engagement in this 2-day forum filled with so many thoughtful and powerful conversations. Um, my name is Curtis Bennett. I'm the Director of Equity and Community Engagement at the National Aquarium and also a steering committee member of the Greater Baltimore Wilderness Coalition. And just have the pleasure and honor to be the moderator for this session all on community engagement. Getting a chance to work with three people who not only do I consider colleagues, but friends and thought partners in this work. People who are really pushing the boundaries, people who are approaching this work with such great intentionality and thought and leadership. So I'm really excited for all of you in the audience this morning to hear their stories. Um, so just a little bit more to introduce the session. We want to make sure that, when we think about community engagement, first being able to unpack the word community, that it can reference a variety of different things from place-based or space-based engagement, interest-based, as well as affinity or identity. And there's a lot of intersection and connectivity amongst all the various aspects or characteristics of community that certainly must be considered when approaching this work with the intended intentionality and authenticity that is required to do this work and do it really well. Um, and this is really work that is so much more about than just to say a position, a department, more than just a program or a project or an initiative. That at the end of the day, this work is really about an ethos change for us as individuals, institutions, and industries to think critically about the work that we do and how we do it, where community is centered as part of those core processes, where we take the time to build transformational relationships. And we invest the resources and time to co-create, co-develop in a very authentic and equitable and inclusive way with partners. This work requires long-term investment, long-term engagement to build the trust, need of trust, to arrive at desired outcomes and outputs. It requires a lot of learning, centering a growth and learning environment and space, where we have to continue to look ourselves in the mirror as organizations, as part of those transformational partnerships, to think critically about the things that we must do to change in order to better center this work moving forward. And so again, I'm honored to really have three individuals that are doing this work at such a high level, and excited to hear their stories and learn from them this morning. So we're going to start the presentations. Each panelist will have a chance to present for about 10 minutes, and then at the end, we'll have time for audience quick Q&A. So please do remember to put your questions in the sessions tab, in the Q&A tab right below it. We'll be monitoring those throughout the session for everyone to engage in. So first off, I want to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Ela Carpenter. Dr. Ela Carpenter is a Baltimore-born and raised urban wildlife biologist. Her childhood experiences in local green space fostered her love of nature in the city. Over the past 15 years, she has been involved in bird and bat research in Maryland, Nevada, and Virginia. She has also spent several years as a science and naturalist educator and believes that it is just as important to share research with the public as it is with fellow researchers. In her current position as an urban wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, she participates in several wildlife research projects in community outreach and programming at Masonville Cove Urban Wildlife Refuge Partnership in South Baltimore and Patuxent Research Refuge in Laurel, Maryland. Thank you so much, Ela, for being here this morning, and we're excited to hear your opening remarks.
So much for presenting. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Curtis, I might need for you to share it. I'm getting an error. Awesome. Thank you so much, Curtis. So again, good morning, everyone. Sorry. So yeah, let me go ahead and start. Next slide. So this is going to be a little bit different of a presentation. There's a lot of feedback. So this is a different kind of presentation. I had a little bit of imposter syndrome when I decided to be part of this panel. I've spent most of my life more on the community side instead of the community engagement aspect. Next slide. Next slide. And so the way I set up these slides were to kind of show one side talking about my own experiences and then what I learned from it or what I hope to kind of take from those experiences and use in my current position. I just started this position with U.S. Fish and Wildlife about 6 months ago. And in that previous slide, you saw kind of these different aspects of my life. And so I haven't done a lot of community engagement yet, but I'm hoping to take my many different experiences in Baltimore and use those to learn from. So starting off, as Curtis mentioned, I was born and raised here. I live in Northwest Baltimore, and as I was growing up, it was in a very crowded little row house. There was about 6 of us there. And so nature became my outlet at an early age. So very crowded inside, but as I was outside, I was explore the things around me. I was very fortunate as well that I had parents that were fond of nature, and it led me to begin my life basically seeing that as a normal thing. And it was jarring as I was growing up to see that not everyone around me had that same perspective. And as I went into high school, this frustration kind of continued as I went to a internship program there and for different sciences. And they basically said, well, you can't really study animals here. Next slide. And so I grew up here, but then I went off to Southern Virginia to do, to get my bachelor's and master's degree. And as part of that, I got to spend a lot of time out in Western United States, especially Nevada. And so getting to experience these really wide open spaces in nature kind of spoiled me. So when I came back to Baltimore, I just felt like there was no career path for me there, and that there was really nothing that Baltimore could offer me. Also, not having a vehicle made it difficult for me to explore the city on my own. And so, as I mentioned before, the right column kind of explains, what I learned from that and the things that I hope to integrate into my future work, especially with my experience in Baltimore, feeling like there wasn't a space for me here, even though I knew what I wanted to do from an early age, looking around and not seeing internship opportunities and not even seeing like visible scientists who looked like me doing work. I thought that, wildlife and ecology work had to be done far away from where I lived. And that really put me at a disadvantage early on, just trying to begin a career path. Next slide. And so I finally was able to see the light, I guess, when it came to the value of Baltimore back in 2013, when I had an opportunity to help with some urban bird surveys in Baltimore. And that was really the first time that I got to see a lot of different green spaces in Baltimore, because, again, I grew up thinking this just wasn't the place for that. And from that opportunity, I ended up going back to grad school, being back in academia. And ironically, I was at the University of Missouri, and I'm halfway across the country, literally in the middle of Missouri. And that is when I was first introduced to things like redlining and segregation that happened in Baltimore, and seeing that different socioeconomic factors shape what kind of nature was and wasn't around us. Let's see. Next slide. And so I had this very academic training, learning about urban ecology, and a lot of time focusing on numbers and metrics and how that associated with wildlife. I recently learned about a concept called the extinction of experience, and I realized that it resonated with me a lot as a resident. So if you click once more, you should see one picture pop up. So this is the neighborhood that I live in Northwest Baltimore. This is a picture that my mom took several years before I was born, and it's just a shot of the houses across the street from me. And you can see there are some trees, there's shrubbery, there's small fencing kind of around each house. And from what I understand, most of those houses were owned by people in the neighborhood. And you can click on one more time and you'll see what the neighborhood looks like today. And you can see all the trees are gone. The shrubs in front of our house have gotten very big, but all the other trees that were in this area are gone, as well as the shrubbery and things like that. And so from an ecologist perspective, we would be thinking very technically like, oh, this is all bird nesting habitat that's all gone. But as a resident, there's also this loss of certain experiences. So, for example, my neighbors across the street, those are all houses that they're renting. So no one owns, or they don't own those houses. They can only spend time on their porch in the afternoons when there's shade there, because the trees are no longer there to give them that experience of just spending time on their porch in the morning. There's also a loss of bird-related experiences that I've noticed. Waking up in the mornings, I don't hear as many types of birds as I used to. One of my fondest childhood memories was being able to feed the birds and watching a crow nesting in the tree across the street from me. And now people in the neighborhood no longer have those kind of experiences. And so it's not just thinking about these things that we can measure, but these kind of intangible, important experiences that help our mental health. Next slide. And so these are just two examples I wanted to share that kind of connect, again, those tangible things with the intangible, where there have been studies that have found that nature helps our mental health, and especially bird biodiversity, where this one study found that it supports our mental health in the same way that an increase in income would help us. And on the flip side, This is Shannon Ledmore, and seeing how those mosquito populations are inequitably distributed in lower income areas. And a lot of her work focuses on the things that you measure, but just from talking to her, I've also learned a lot of the residents' experiences in those areas, and they don't spend time in their backyards and they don't spend time sitting on the stoop. So there's also this loss of experience that goes with some of the things that we measure as scientists. Next slide. So another aspect of my life in Baltimore has been spending a lot of time at Gwynns Falls and Lincoln Park, also here in Northwest Baltimore. And so I've gotten to see firsthand the importance of nonprofit groups like the Friends of Gwynns Falls, Lincoln Park, who take their roles as stewards very seriously and do a lot of good work for those green spaces. I was also a naturalist for the Carrie Mary Nature Center for City Rec and Parks for a while. And that also allowed me to see firsthand the importance of sometimes the informal education, just allowing kids to kind of have space in nature and just give them permission to explore, not necessarily try to cram lots of information into their heads, just letting them be in nature. I also witnessed firsthand the frustration with not having enough funding and resources and personnel to support the park. It is a very big park, and most of the folks in the Friends group do a big chunk of the work of taking care of it. And because of that, we also see a lot of misuse and abuse of the park space, which can be a deterrent for some folks to even want to come there. And I'm sure some folks are already familiar with some of the not so great reputation that Lincoln Park has. And so that time in my life gave me a good understanding of the importance of really being like on the ground, taking care of land, the importance of informal environmental education, and had me thinking about ways to make these kind of opportunities and experiences accessible to more folks. Next slide. And so just at the beginning of this year, I began this position with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, working at Masonville Cove, being not just an urban wildlife biologist, but also doing a lot of work with community outreach and engagement. And so I'm still very much new and learning the process of how to do that and learning from folks like Curtis about ways to be available as a resource, not necessarily me going out and teaching people about things, but really just being available. Like, how do you all need me? What do you need from an urban wildlife biologist? Just wanting to be available as a resource, however I'm needed. A lot of times when I was in academia and we'd read these science papers, there's always this little blurb at the end about how the research has certain management implications, and community outreach and engagement is always like a sentence in there. And so I spent most of my academic career kind of seeing that. And now I'm actually shifting from reading about it and agreeing with it to actually doing the work. And a part of that involves decolonizing my thoughts. Next slide. So this is a really awesome paper that a colleague of mine, Dr. Madhu Sudan Kadi, just published. I would definitely recommend, if you have the opportunity to read this, to please do so. It focuses on decolonizing science, specifically urban ecology. But I feel like a lot of what he talks about, he and his colleagues talk about, is equally applicable to community engagement. And if I could define decolonization in a really concrete way, I guess, it would be this first bullet, just really thinking about identifying the gaze and the pose that we adopt in our work. So thinking about why we use certain terms like New World and Old World, or neotropical birds, or even the concept of the wilderness or the wild, which implies the separation between people and nature. And not all cultures have that same belief of that separatedness. So why do we choose to have one standpoint versus the other? And I basically just copied excerpts from this paper because it was so good. I didn't even feel the need to rephrase it because they really just said it perfectly, talking about collaboration as well and just being able to listen and being willing to grow and having an awareness of challenges that you may not necessarily have, but other folks may have. In one of the presentations I saw yesterday, I remember hearing this emphasis on empathy and how that's so important to step outside of your own viewpoint and try to see things from other folks' perspectives and work towards a common goal. Next slide. So in a nutshell, this was just me talking about my various experiences in Baltimore and kind of how I've used those experiences to integrate in my future work with community engagement as I go from talking the talk to walking the walk. I definitely want to focus on listening. I want to focus on visibility. So visibility of, caretaking of green spaces, visibility of various types of career opportunities, visibility of basically everything good, because I feel fortunate that I have this job in this position right now, but given how my experience was growing up in Baltimore, it was not an easy career path for me. When I spent most of my life believing that this just wasn't something that was available for me in Baltimore and that I would need to leave to do this work. And as I mentioned towards the end, uniting a lot of our work is very tangible things, getting metrics, being able to document things, but also merging that with some of the intangible things that really support mental health and people feeling safe and protected. I think that's it. There might be one more slide, but I think that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Ela. Just really powerful remarks and such a powerful story and journey that you shared this morning, and we're so grateful for that amazing message. And now I'd like to take the time to introduce our next panelist, next speaker. And this will be Abel Olivo. Abel is the executive director of Defensores de la Cuenca, which translates to Watershed Defenders, a nonprofit dedicated to engaging Latinos and Spanish speakers in watershed-related issues and experiences. A community activist from Prince George's County, Maryland, Abel uses his insights and perspectives as a former lobbyist and advocate to connect resources and relationships through coalition building and strategic partnerships for the community. Welcome, Abel, and we're again looking forward to hearing your remarks this morning as well.
Thank you, Curtis, and thank you, Ela, for your tremendous words. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Can you all see that okay? I hope so. Anyway, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today at City Nature. My name is Abel Olivo. As Curtis said, I'm the Executive Director for Defensores de la Cuenca. Here on the topic of broadening the conversation, community engagement, and climate resiliency. Starting my timer here. So who are we? ¿Quiénes somos? We're an organization that works to engage the Latino community through a variety of methods and means for the purpose of building out a knowledge bank. We want to create opportunities to invite the community to come and to visit these new spaces, to have these experiences in family, in community, in a comfortable and inviting way. We know for a lot of our Latino and immigrant population, visiting these new spaces is not as simple as it would appear. We are extremely busy with our daily lives. A lot of our community work 6 days a week, and finding time to come into these new spaces is very difficult. So working to make them as engaging and as appealing to be worth their time is one of our goals. The purpose of the work that we do is to work ultimately to build out a network of leaders, to invite more people into this space, because we know that we're competing for, again, for people's time away from their family, time away from church, time away from their work. So if we're able to create opportunities to engage them, to build in all three of those aspects, we're more likely to get repeat customers. We're more likely to spark an interest in someone and looking at nature and the environment from a health perspective. How does tree canopy or watershed issues impact my personal health? If we're able to connect faith, allowing people to connect to nature and the environment through creation care ideas, the call for the faithful to be stewards of the creation, that's another aspect. Ultimately, as I said, building out a network of leaders is our goal, because we need more people, more people of color to be Black and brown folks to be involved in the nature and environment work, because we're the community that's most impacted by these severe weather events, and we need people to be out there advocating for their own self-interest. So in recognition of why we exist and the way that we exist, we service the Chesapeake Bay watershed area, which is a large footprint. In the United States, we have 18.5% of Latino community. It's estimated to be over 28% by 2060. And that, of course, is recognizing that we are often underrepresented in the census numbers. Across Maryland, 20% of Latinos make up Montgomery County, 9.8% in Eastern Maryland. Prince George's is over 21%, and City of Baltimore is 4.2, which was double what it was. And I suspect that as we get into new figures of the census, it will be probably more than double that. So engaging the community, there are a number of challenges. First and foremost is language. Many of the community that we serve are about 70% language isolation rate. There's some folks understand English, many prefer to speak Spanish. So working to overcome the language barrier. Trust, as I think Curtis mentioned, moving at the speed of trust. It is a long and difficult thing to establish. The political climate, certainly over the past administration and even before then, has really made the Latino immigrant community nervous about engaging with new programs or visiting these spaces with uniformed officers. Who are they? What are their purposes? Am I going to be accosted when I get there? We don't want no trouble. We just want to go and have fun. But if we perceive the place not to be for us, we're not going to go there. In time, as I said earlier, we're competing for people's time. So we need to make these engagements or our connection to the community multifaceted, multi-purpose, so that we know that they're going to give us their time. People can take off work, absolutely. That's not necessarily the issue. The issue is when our community miss work, that is $75, $100, $50. That means rent. That means food on the table. That is real impact to our personal prosperity. So making sure that what we do is really worth it. So factors of successful engagement, messaging. Ela had mentioned something about, like language. How do we approach things? One thing that I think of and I hear often is the term citizen science. If you go and you're talking about citizen science to students, they know that their parents are not documented. They know their, some of them, their status. That that simple term automatically gets the kid, and this is children thinking, that's not for us, that's not for me, that's not for my family, we're not welcome. So thinking about how you approach things in language in your messaging is super important. Strategy, again, when we're engaging the community, we always think of how to approach it from the perspective of the immigrant, the recent arrival, limited income, limited English proficiency, thinking in terms of how to deal with registration. If we want to have people register, that is a really difficult thing to ask people to do, especially if they're navigating through mobile devices. If you're not mobile friendly, if you're telling people to go to your website and it is clunky and it's not available in Spanish, you're not going to get the participation that you really want. And partnerships, tremendously, tremendously important. You can't necessarily get anywhere without that partnerships. So, and just kind of getting a little deeper into that, thinking about the engagement in terms of environmental justice, how what you're doing needs to be addressing environmental justice, in recognizing longstanding racist land use policies, recognizing access, recognizing how the communities are impacted by the environment, what that means in terms of rates of asthma and heart disease and diabetes, and how that translates to educational attainment or financial long-term financial success. These the environment has a tremendous deep impact to communities of color, and you need to be approaching it from that point of view. And if you don't have that point of view, and regardless if you have that point of view, partnerships, you need to build partnerships with local on the ground communities or community organizations. Those partnerships will allow you to have more insight into what challenges the communities are facing. If you don't have a perspective on that, you need to get partnerships to help you have better cultural competency. And in that cultural competency, you'll be able to better your programs. You'll be able to tweak your programs. You'll be able to think about your own policies to be more inviting to communities of color, to frontline and fence line communities. You might be able to start to think about hosting or hiring within your own organization, Black, African American, Latino, Latina, to come and work for you. The reality is many organizations just aren't ready to support a person of color in their organization. Policies, this is the way we've always done it, we've been successful this way, the microaggressions from a structural organization standpoint. Many organizations just aren't ready to host or to support a person of color within their organization. Having those partnerships will help you get there, and will ultimately help you. Am I still here? Sorry. Okay. Will help you diversify internally, because when, and I heard this, Curtis and Ela mentioned this, there's a lot of a lack of investment within the community. Investing in the community does not mean investing in yourself. Investing in the community means investing in the community, working to build out their structure, working out to build out their network, working to build out, to bring resources to the community on the ground. Translating stuff, your material, that helps you. It does help bring some resources, yes, but you need to start with the partnerships and help develop those partnerships and support those organizations, because otherwise this structure is not gonna, it's gonna be short-lived. So building that one of the biggest barriers is building trust through authenticity. Think about, why do you want to connect to the Latino community? Make your motives be rooted in justice, equity, inclusion, and know that it's the right thing to do for the community's sake. Let your actions speak for you. You know, what you do and how you do it will be noticed, and people will take note and will make their decisions based on that. And then keep your commitment. Your word is your worth. Really, if you say you're going to do something, be there for community, be there to support them, and don't think about, well, this is a 1-year project. I've got funding for 1 year. This is our metric, and we're gonna plant a bunch of trees and we're gonna pick up a bunch of trash, without really giving the community any trajectory to go from. That's not that is not long-term commitment. Your commitment is to the community. You need to be thinking about things in 5, 10, 15-year increments instead of just the 1-year funding cycle. Be prepared to take that hard look. Stand in front of the mirror and think about what you're doing and how you're doing it, how you're engaging the community. Think about how your own policies are keeping people are not as successful as you would want them to be. Ultimately, the thing that I want to impress upon the group is you cannot do this on your own. No matter how much you invest in yourself, it's not going to work. You need to invest in the community. You must partner with organizations to help you. And just want to end on this very astute and very insightful quote from Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. It's as simple as that. You know what the barriers are. You need to work to eliminate them. You need to work to engage the community. And if there are, I'm looking forward to having the discussion with the group here, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Abel, and just incredibly important remarks around the importance of partnerships, the trust building, and centering community investment with those partners on the ground. Just it's incredibly important when building the sustainable foundation for this work. So, thank you so much for all the transformational work that you do. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Kenyatta Rao Jr. And just a little bit of background about Randy is that he is the new program coordinator for the Chesapeake Research Consortium's Chesapeake Student Recruitment, Early Advisement, and Mentoring Program, otherwise known as C-STREAM. He has a master's degree from Virginia Tech, Executive Masters of Natural Resources and Global Sustainability, and a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Randy has a background in executive and administrative management and natural resource and sustainability. He also has grant and proposal writing firm, R&R and Associates, that specializes in environmental construction and facilitates bids for minority-owned contractors for green infrastructure development. Randy is also the visionary founder of Replant Annapolis, a program to incentivize planting trees on residential properties throughout the city. Randy is also a member of the City of Annapolis Environmental Commission, as well as a member of the Waterways Cabinet, a task force formed specifically by the mayor for environmental restoration and sustainability developments. Randy, thank you for being here, and we look forward to hearing your remarks this morning.
All right, greetings everyone. Let's share my screen here. Y'all see my screen, and can you hear me? Okay. All right, cool. So my name is Randy Rao. As Mr. Curtis, good partner of mine, has delayed the information, I'm sharing a presentation today on a case study of community engagement and community and climate resiliency, and giving you a closer look from a practitioner's viewpoint on the arts of innovative collaborations. One thing that I always emphasize as being very important in this work is long-term empathy versus short-term sympathy, and identifying resources of places in the world who are doing the things that we may be wanting to do that are also having success at it. So identifying kind of the evidence base in our work is very important. And you can click that link if you like to get some more information on what the Jabal Garati Foundation and the Water Resource Council are doing in urban and in rural Indias. Me, myself, I'm an Annapolitan. I worked for the Boys and Girls Club for 10 years. I switched into the environmental industry in sustainability as a commercial solar professional. I'm currently on the Environmental Commission for the City of Annapolis, where I head up the DEIJ division that I started. And I also was the first ever diversity and inclusion officer for the Maryland State Department of Natural Resources. I'm a direct descendant of Harriet Tubman by way of my sixth great grandfather, Reverend Samuel Green, who was one of the visionary founders of Morgan State University and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. My undergrad is from UMES in social science, and my master's is in executive management of natural resources and global sustainability. And I have some global experience, having worked in India and Jamaica and a few other places. I'm also a Master Watershed Stewards Academy Class 7 graduate, where my capstone was the Annapolis Broadening Ephemeral Channel Restoration Project, which was actually the largest amount ever awarded in the state of Maryland for an environmental restoration on a historical African-American church site. That was for $560,000. So a little bit about me. So why are we here? Why is literacy so important in community engagement? I'll tell you a story. When I was in India, we had to present to some locals, and we had the amazement to know that there aren't even words in their lexicon, in the Hindi lexicon language, that represent some of the environmental sustainability terms and practices we were trying to present. So that became a big issue. So what we had to do was kind of be what they have done, is been more innovative in how they present things like model structures and things like that to actually show some of the work that is wanting to be done. And so we're here today to learn and understand, engage, but also to identify some best practices and real life experiences to help give us a better roadmap and a starting point and an endpoint to our goal. I represent as a public speaker as well. In this picture, I was speaking at the Maryland Conservation Job Corps graduation. It's about 400 young adults from Baltimore County and City. And just being an influential champion, an agent for environmental and social change is something that I resonate with heavily. And if you are wanting to do this work and you have administrative powers, one thing you want to do is be able to identify where the resources and influential champions are in these communities. That's going to be a very key aspect of your march. So keep that in mind. The challenge we have is dealing with educator equity. I also worked before my new role, I was a teacher for 4 years for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, teaching science and mathematics for middle and high school. And I represented the 1% of the United States of Black male teachers. So again, Black and Latino Spanish-speaking teachers, it's something that you want to try to encourage in your work, getting people in front of others that look like those in those communities. The DEIJ confidence and merit just speaks for organizations and individuals wanting to gain that professional development so that they can speak confidently in these circles, even when there are cultural differences and cultural backgrounds. That speaks to a certain merit that we should all seek for. And that even speaks for myself, because in some rooms I'm not, the majority. So again, my experiences as an educator has led me to creating different modifying techniques and theoretical frameworks that deal with asset-based theory and community organizing theory, which are two theories that are stemmed completely out of public health. My experiences connecting with these curriculums has led me to running my own summer camp program called School on Water. I taught summer bridge. I had an after-school sustainability program and more. So as of recently, I had partnered with Black Excel to do community gardens throughout Annapolis's hacker communities. It's been a really great success. Also in my consultant work, I was able to write a grant that was landed for the Chesapeake Bay Trust to do community engagement work and outreach for their Chesapeake Conservation Corps program, which again, in the COVID scope, adds a new value, a new layer of approach that also is very important. And here are a few links to some resources and proof on how starting a community of practice can work, and some other op-eds. So you can click those links as well. And just a quick refresher that Maryland was the first state to mandate environmental and outdoor educational literacy program. And so we have the chance here in this area, in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, to essentially be a part of global history. If we can solve our bay, save our bay, et cetera, create this workforce around the bay, we could essentially be a pilot program for the world. And so I just want to keep that in mind. Some visuals when I was in India. This was in the rural village of Rajasthan region in Jodhpur. And we had a lunch prepared for us right there on the spot. Summer bridge. This is some of the Chesapeake Conservation Corps poster contests at the Chesapeake Forum. And again, we want to make learning fun. We want to incentivize these outcomes and make a positive learning environment for our youth that they can relate to and connect to. That's a very important aspect of this. And as you can see here, I mentioned about the different models and structures. Here's an example of these models and structures that the Jal Bhagirathi Foundation uses as a means to connect to residents and local communities. So what brought me to this work was definitely my passion for wanting to connect with individuals like such as myself, and my ability to use my platform and my speaking voice to connect with people who are also charged with this same being. And that is just getting more people involved with outdoors and nature and using it as a healing situation. And so, one of the keys to my successes has always been my ability to navigate and engage and network with people that are doing the work that needs to be done. And so that is a value in itself. So this can also be both mentally and emotionally draining, especially teaching. So one of the things that I do, and these are my two children over there to the right, Kit, Hillary, and Kingston. One of the things that I do as a keys to my success is taking time out to reflect and giving back. Providing a living, breathing example to some of these youth of someone that is doing it, can do it, and is successful at it, and being kind of a person that they can look up to in that regard. So more or less not about talking, more so about action. And that's what's led me to where I am today. Self-care, I do a lot of golf. I recently bought a little putting mat to practice my 10-foot putts because I suck at them. And here's a picture to the right of the community garden that we built in a hacker community in Annapolis, Eastport Terrace, in the Harbor House community. And just to give you a scope of that. All right. And that is all. Mr. Curtis.
All right. Thank you so much, Randy, for your remarks this morning as well. And I'd like to invite all the panelists back up to the stage, please. just for some concluding remarks. Um, just one of the parting questions. I know we're running out of time, but if you all could speak very, very briefly to sharing just a very short example of success. What is that? What has that looked like for you all in the work that you're doing? Abel, starting with you, any example that comes to mind?
Seeing the same faces over and over again, getting people to come back. It's challenging. It's, again, kind of recognizing that we're competing for people's time, and that time is real dollars and cents to communities on the fence line, front line. And just the excitement, enthusiasm for these opportunities to engage and start to build community. When for example, when we had a couple fishing days recently where we invite people to come out to fish, to learn about fish, and use that as an opportunity to talk about water quality and our impact on the water quality in the watershed, stormwater runoff, and really making that activity relatable. A lot of the Latino community like to fish, and many consume the fish, but knowing that many times it's not safe. We had a great day at Bladensburg Waterfront Park. We had another day at Lake Artemisia, and the catches, some great big blue cat that are absolutely not safe to consume. And we had people wanting to take the catch home, and we just took the opportunity again to bring home that water quality, stormwater runoff, and how it translates to what we do.
And Randy, how about for you? Just a quick example for
Yeah, so I'll just give a quick example of when I was at DNR, I instituted the first ever bilingual assessment tool in HR, which was a means to pay Latinos and Spanish-speaking individuals who are using their bilingual skills on the job every day. And I saw the example of rangers using phones to connect with Spanish-speaking workers to put them on the intercom to project over beaches with hundreds and hundreds of people because they didn't have anyone on staff that spoke Spanish. And so that's a problem to me. And just to, piggyback off of Mr. Abel's statement, and again, speaking on the emphasis of language and linguistics, and how that plays a part. So.
Much for that, Randy. And Ela, how about for you? What has been like a success story for community engagement efforts that have resonated with you?
As I mentioned before, I'm still relatively new to this, but I would say one small success that I had at my previous job was setting up a master naturalist course during the pandemic. So initially I set it up, it got canceled. I figured out a way to make it accessible by making it virtual partially, and we had about 9 folks attend. So, and just trying to figure out how to get the word out that we were still having it. That was a small success, but I'm definitely looking forward to having much bigger successes in the future as I do more work.
I just want to again take the time to say thank you to each and every one of you for sharing your wisdom, your expertise, your experiences this morning. And again, for everyone in the audience for again taking the time to be with us this morning for the Nature City Forum, and specifically for this community engagement panel and session. These 3 individuals here have had just, so many incredible and transformational experiences in this space. And I know that I've come away from these spaces, as I always tend to do, learning so much and things to really take with me and to continue to center in this work moving forward. I just want to, conclude by tying some things together, some key things that we heard this morning from the panelists. Ela, we heard about listening and really decolonizing our thoughts. thinking differently about the perspectives that we're bringing as individuals and organizations to this work. From Abel, the values of partnership, and trust building, really that continued and sustained investment, really centering community as part of that. And lastly, from Randy, really appreciated what you shared about self-care. This work can be very mentally and emotionally taxing for all parties involved. And it is important to make sure that self-care is centered as part of this. Also a point that Randy shared that I think is so important is this opportunity for compensating people, and Abel, you echoed this as well, for their time, compensating partners equitably, keyword equitably, and as part of this work moving forward, to ensure and enhance sustainability of the work moving forward. And so I encourage all of you to, that we must continue to learn from each other, continue working in this community of practice that we formed this morning, continuing to learn from our three panelists. And I think all of us are also excited to learn from all of you in the audience. I think we all bring so much to this work, and there's always roles that we can play each and every day to ensure that this work is meaningful, impactful, and sustainable. And with that, I'd like to say again, thank you so much to our panelists, Ela, Abel, and Randy. And thank you to everyone in the audience this morning. And we look forward to your continued engagement with the Nature City Forum conference experience on the rest of the day. So thank you, and have a great rest of your morning and afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Curtis, for your leadership. And Ella and Abel as well.
Likewise, thank you for your words and your wisdom.
Take care.